everyone, and welcome back to my... Today we are doing something very special. We are starting off a series that I am very excited about. This is a series where I will be playing NBA 2K15, which is my favorite game, because NBA is my favorite thing of all time. And what I will be doing is I will be playing through the entire gambit of NBA teams through use of the My Team domination mode. As I am doing that, I will then comment on whatever team I'm playing about the real-life NBA team. Talk about the roster, how they're doing this season, what they can do to do better, stuff like that. Because I just love talking about the NBA, and I thought this would be an interesting way to do it. Because you get to watch the gameplay of me going into team, which is made up of my team players. So it's players you may not be able to see together normally, going against the NBA team. One, you can see how I do, and the other is you get to hear me talk about the real life NBA team. So I think that'd be interesting. So let's get underway.
This is Kevin Harlan. Doris Burke will be along too from the sideline. It's Dallas facing Utah.
All right. So for my team, just so you all know, my team is composed of entirely bronze players. It's all bronze players, so kind of low value players. Partly because the reason why I'm doing this is since I've already played through most of the domination mode myself with my own teams. But this way, I can, for one thing, grind. Be a fun way for me to grind to get more of my team points. Also, I think it would allow me to just kind of play without really thinking, and hopefully be able to talk and get my ideas out more clearly. So let's get started. So Utah Jazz. Utah Jazz are an interesting team. They're in the Western Conference, so they're already going to have a little bit of disadvantage to try to make any kind of serious noise in there with the massive depth of teams there are in the West. But if you look at their standings right now, they're doing okay. If you look at the bottom of the pack of the West, they're right there in the middle. They're at 19 and 34. So not too bad, relatively speaking, to the rest of the conference, but not too great. What I like to think about them is that they're just a very young, reliable team. A lot of their best players are really young. You look at, they just re-signed Gordon Hayward to a massive contract last year. They still have Derek Favors, who was the number 3 pick a couple years ago. Still Vance Canner, Trey Burr, they just got Dante Exum. So they have a lot of their key pieces are really young players. So because of that, it's going to be hard for them to compete night to night with all these veteran teams out there. But they do have some nice pieces. So let's start with Trey Burke, their starting point guard. Trey Burke is a solid athlete, and at Michigan he was a great scorer getting into the paint. A little more difficult to do that in the NBA, but he's still feisty as ever. He's improved his shot greatly, which he's definitely going to need if he's going to survive with the other point guards in the league. But I think he's got the work ethic and the skills to do it. Next we'll go to Alec Burks, who is currently out for the season because of an injury. But I think he's a solid shooting guard. He's got size, he can rebound, most importantly, he can score. He's primarily a shooter, but he's got good range, and he's just got good fight. He's just another one of those nice little young pieces that's really, I think, can come to his own in a couple of years. And then we'll go to their all-star, their best player, Gordon Hayward. Gordon is one of those glue guys. He's one of those all-around, just solid players. He doesn't do anything particularly great, but he does everything pretty decently. He's a good shooter, he's a good driver, he's a good rebounder, he's a decent defender. He just does everything because that's what Utah asks from him. Since they don't have much talent around him, they put a lot of weight on his shoulders to get the job done night in and night out. Now we'll go to the big man, Derek Favors, who over the last couple years I've really grown to like a lot. He's a big body, 6'10", 240, 250, and he plays big. He rebounds in the paint, he can score in the paint. He's just a guy that when he's on the floor, you have to keep an eye out. Because if you're not careful, he can go in there and dominate a game on the inside. Then you have Enes Kanter, who's kind of wavered in his time in the NBA. He's a big body, a real big body, but he's European, so he's got that, you know, little foreign touch. He's a very nice shooter from mid-range. He's not a great rebounder, not a great defender, but he uses his size, so that's important. But he just really hasn't clicked over the last couple of years. He had some nice moments last year where you thought he was finally getting the groove, but this year he just kind of fallen out of place, which has allowed for younger players to come in. One of them being Rudy Gobert. Rudy Gobert has had an amazing kind of mid to late half of the season. He's already an efficient shot blocker. That's what you knew you were getting out of him when Utah drafted him. He's a big guy, long arms, great athlete, and he can block shots. And that's what, I mean, he's just a great skill that any team would love to have. So great, in fact, that I actually picked him up on my fantasy team, and he's done solid for me ever since I picked him up. And eventually he should supplant Kanter as a starting center because he just complements that team so well. You get Favors, you can kind of do that inside-outside game on offense, and on defense, you allow him to play a power forward, whereas allow Rudy Gobert to come in off the weak side and block some shots, which is what he's great at. Next we'll go to their other rookie that they acquired this year, Dante Exum. A lot of hype was surrounding him coming to the draft. He was this great Australian player that no one had ever seen. So we had a lot of hype going to him, and I think that kind of hurt him early on in the season because everyone was expecting so much, and he didn't really do that pow that we all expected him. But I think he will be a solid player in this league. He's a good athlete. He's got long arms. He's got a nice dribble. If he can get a truly consistent shot, then he'll become an even more dangerous point guard and be able to set up his teammates that much more efficiently. Now, like I said, with the injury to Alec Burks, there became some open minutes for the two-guard position. And from that, you got Joe Ingles, Elijah Millsap, and Rodney Hood, who have kind of shared the load in getting that two-guard spot. Of them, I like Rodney Hood. I really do. He's a tall guy with a nice three-point shot. I think he needs to get a little bit bigger, put up some muscle, and then he become a really interesting defender. With that length, and if he got a little more size, he can become a very decent defender. Along with a three-point shot, any team would love to have him, especially Utah. Because I think that's something that Utah desperately needs. They need more shooters. You got Gordon Hayward there who can create and kind of dribble and kind of run the floor. So if you give him a couple more shooters out there, I think he would really benefit and the team would really benefit. Some of the other pieces, look at some of the forwards. They have Jeremy Evans, who was, of course, the dunk contest winner a couple years ago. And really, that's kind of all he does. He's 6'10", 240, and he can jump. He can certainly jump. If he can turn that into rebounding and attacking the rim, then he'll be a nice player. But right now he's just a good athlete and not really a complete NBA player. I think that's what's holding him back. Now we'll go to Trevor Booker. Now he's the big down and dirty player of the team. He's a guy who's going to fight in the paint. He's going to get you those tough rebounds. He can score every now and then if he gets an wide open enough shot. And he's going to do the dirty work. Every team needs a player who's going to go out there and do the dirty work. Something that's invaluable on any team.
They trail by 6.
Ooh, that's a good shot.
There's Exum.
First quarter. Last player I'll bring up is Steve Novak, who is he's their veteran shooter. That's what he is. Anywhere he goes, that's what he does. He's a tall guy, 7 foot, and he can knock down the three. And like I said, any team loves to have more shooters. Shooters just make the game so much easier nowadays. Alright, that's the end of the first quarter, and that's the end of my roster breakdown. Nice little timing out there. So now as we move to the second quarter, we will talk about the team itself. how they're doing and how they're playing and what's like playing against them. So, Utah Jazz, they're just a young team. They're going to outrun you. They play tough every night. They're one of those teams where, even though they're a lower seed in the West, their record might not be as great, they're a team that they can be pretty dangerous on a night-to-night basis. They've got the, even though they're young, they're talented. And with that talent, they can surprise some teams on certain nights. I mean, you look back at some of their schedule, they beat the New Orleans Pelicans. Of course, that was without Anthony Davis, so that helped out a lot. And then they beat Chicago back in January. They beat the Warriors also in January. So, I mean, they're not a team that to be taken lightly, even though their record isn't as great as some of the other teams. They still have talent on their roster, and if you're not careful, they can surprise you. So how do you play against them? Well, there's two main guys you want to control. You want to control Gordon Hayward, and you want to control Derek Favors. Those are the two guys that can take over and will really mess you up. Derek Favors, if he gets rolling on the inside and he gets that confidence up, he just becomes a machine. He can just take on anybody. He'll take on the world, and he'll just dominate on the side. Gordon Hayward, I mean, he's their best player. So if he gets rolling, then that gets everybody else going, and he can become more of a facilitator, more of that rebounding guy. You look at that. And right there, Gordon Hayward leads them in scoring with 19.7 points a game. Derek Favors is about right behind him at 15.9. I mean, that's what this team does. But on the other end, on defense, they've got their new weapon, Rudy Gobert. That's what makes it so great. You have all these athletic wing players. You allow them to be a little more risky on the defensive end, allow them to go after steals and really attack the perimeter. Because you know you got a guy in the back who's averaging 2.2 blocks a game, who, if anything gets close to him, he's going to send it away. So Rudy Gobert has done a really nice job in completing this team, because you knew it was missing something. And a big key of that is the defensive end, where every team needs to have defense. As the old adage goes, defense wins championships. And it's no more different today than it was back then. Now, another key factor of this team are their guards. I mean, look, they already had a pretty nice young point guard in Trey Burke last year, and then they went ahead and drafted Dante Exum. So I started questioning, like, is that really the best move for them? When they could go out and acquire another shooter, get another perimeter threat that could really help solidify this team. But they chose a different direction, which is fine. They're the NBA team. They need to make those decisions. But it always interests me when teams like to do that, where they focus on getting a stellar backup instead of getting a stellar starter. It's interesting. Especially if you think about their point guard position. The point guard position is so deep in the NBA. It's easily the deepest position in all the league. And from that, you get so many great points. Especially if you just look at the West alone. You look at all the top teams in the West, they all have great point guards. You can go down the line. You go Steph Curry, Mike Conley, Damian Lillard, Rondo, Chris Paul, Patrick Beverley's a good defensive point guard, Tony Parker, of course. Suns have 3 of them, for gosh sakes, with Bledsoe, Dragic, and Thomas. Although Dragic might be out of the way, and like the Suns, maybe in time, we'll talk about them. Or possibly tomorrow, because I'm thinking about for Thursday, since this is a trade deadline, I'm thinking about doing a special episode where I play with teams involved. I think that would be quite interesting. Alrighty.
And that one falls for Burke.
And we'll give a pause a second, because this video is probably going to end in about a couple seconds.